Shalom, this is Daniel Stern of the Netivyah Bible Instruction Ministry coming to you from our offices in downtown Jerusalem, and I wanted to give you an update about the war. As you know, the cessation of hostilities, the ceasefire has ended, broken down, as a dual result of the Hamas not having more hostages to return to Israel based on the parameters discussed, in other words, women and children, and the Hamas starting to launch missiles into Israel still during the time of the ceasefire. That said, many hostages were returned during this time. Unfortunately, so were many criminals were released. I know that some might say, why do you make the difference? But it is an obvious difference. 3-year-old children, 5-year-old children, 80-plus-year-old women, as opposed to late teenagers and women who committed felonies, who tried to harm and kill people, other innocent people, whether it was Molotov cocktails, knives, car bombs, compared to children and women and elderly taken in their pajamas from their beds and their homes. So there isn't a moral equivalency. That said, we're glad to have those returned that were released. So praise God for that. If you followed me in the past, you would have known that one of my concerns was that the cessation of hostilities would result in a wind down of this war into just another round of violence between Israel and the Hamas. I'm glad to say, even though every life is precious, and even this morning, 3 soldiers, the names of them, 3 soldiers who fell in combat were released after their families were informed, and the consequence of war is dead people, be it soldiers, civilians, terrorists, and whatnot. I am not glad for anyone who dies, but at the same time, the situation that was created here in Israel is not one that the Israeli population can live with, certainly not having 1,400 people slaughtered and 240 people kidnapped, not to mention many wounded, not to mention missiles and so on. Certainly something had to change. So I'm glad that the army is continuing to do what needs to be done. That is very good, very positive. Again, I'm not joyful at anyone's death, but something needed to happen. In the northern front, hostilities had also come to a halt during the ceasefire with the Hamas. It was a decision by the Hezbollah, who, of course, were the ones who started the hostilities when Israel started its operations towards the Hamas. The Hezbollah showed its support by attacking Israel. And then when there was a short ceasefire, the Hezbollah chose to stop. And as soon as the ceasefire ended, the Hezbollah started once again. We will see how that develops. Sources tell me that we are gearing towards an operation in the north. Of course, it's not confirmed, and things change on I wouldn't even say daily basis, but hourly basis. But in any case, currently, the IDF has gone back to its continuing its occupation of the northern Gaza Strip, specifically Gaza City. Before the cessation of hostilities, the IDF had claimed that it had captured most of the city. During the cessation, it was clear that the underground metro, the hundreds of kilometers of tunnels built by the Hamas, using all the finances and materials given to them by good-willed people around the world to aid the poor Palestinian people that were used to build their military might, was still intact and that hostages were released from within those tunnels. So clearly the IDF has more work to do. Additionally, the IDF, or the IAF, the Israel Air Force, started targeted bombing in southern Gaza Strip, in the eastern side of Khan Yunis, where they will be doing apparently the ground operation will continue there. Additionally, of course, it goes without saying that the army is doing its best to not harm civilians and certainly not target civilians, and is directing civilians to leave areas and go to other areas. Unfortunately, war has collateral damage, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made an unfortunate phrase when he was talking about the courageous lawyer that put an end to two terrorists who had killed two people in Jerusalem the other day, and the soldier courageously drew his personal weapon and killed them, and then he unfortunately was killed by reserve duty soldiers who saw the situation, mistakenly identified him as a terrorist, and shot him. And our Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, unfortunately used the phrase, "This is war, that's life. This is what happens." He was bombarded and lambasted for using such a phrase, even though it is true, but it was insensitive towards the human tragedy of this hero of Israel who died due to mistaken identity. So, unfortunately, in war, tragedies happen. There's civilian casualties. In a separate video, I will talk about the Hamas using civilians as human shields and raising the number of casualties. But for now, this is what is happening. The IDF has resumed the war. We at Netivyah are continuing to gear up troops. Just on Sunday this week, we did a whole round of driving in the south, did a circuit down south around the Gaza Strip and back up through a large base south of Beersheba, and provided multiple units with lots of gear, which they were, of course, very appreciative of. And God bless you all from Jerusalem. Please continue to share our videos, share the truth, share what you believe to be factual truth. Use discernment. Not everything you see is true, but it's important to share this knowledge with those around us.